Good evening and welcome to Bleak. On this evening's episode, Laura is going to be covering the Johnson Bentley murders out of British Columbia, Canada. And I, Amanda, will be covering the murder and or suicide or murder and suicide, you can decide for yourself, of Rebecca Zahau out of Coronado, California. Buckle up those seatbelts. Grab your vomit bag and remember to assist others, or no, put your own mask on before assisting others. Don't.
Your own mask?
Yeah, your own oxygen mask.
Okay. Is this like a COVID mask?
Things are already running off the rails. It's about to get bleak.
How's it going, Amanda? How are the kids, the spouse, the whatever you have, fish? How are the fish?
Everybody is alive and well.
Excellent. All the fish too?
I mean, possibly. I'm sure that they do pass away from time to time.
Yeah, they have shorter lifespans than most of us.
I'm okay with that. So yeah, we're finally got together to do a new episode. I was close to enlisting random people to host the show.
No.
But Laura finally.
I found it offensive.
I was gonna have a couple girls I hadn't seen since high school possibly be co-hosts.
No.
Which would have been fun. I mean, I could have reconnected
that would be okay. But you should do a different podcast.
That's true.
Called Amanda's Old Friends in Company or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would listen to that.
They might. Come on.
Right.
Come on now. So,
the cases so you get a double banger tonight.
Woo!
2 cases, so that's exciting.
Excellent.
And we're kind of going completely different than cases we've done in the past. Obviously, every case is its own entity and is unique in its own way, but Laura is covering a case it's like a mass murder situation, and
it was
I don't know, because I have
family murder.
Family annihilation.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
And hers takes place in the 1980s, which is not a decade we have ever covered anything in.
No.
Up to this point, and I don't think we've ever gone to Canada, so that's new.
We have been to Canada. Oh, no.
No.
Okay, sorry. I thought you meant in our lives.
No. I mean, like, on the podcast.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yes, we've been to Canada one time.
But not in the podcast.
Yes.
That's true.
And then my case comes out of California, and we have also not covered any California cases. So we're kind of
new territory.
Keeping it all over the map here.
Yes.
All right. So with that being said, Laura is going to get us started here, and so she's going to be talking about you tell them, Laura.
The Johnson Bentley murders. So it's a family of 4, right? So you've got a mom, a dad, Bob and Jackie Johnson. You've got 2 female kiddos, Janet and Karen, 13 and 11, Johnson. And then you've got Jackie's parents who meet up for the weekend at this campsite to, see the family, and that is who did not make it. They did not make it out, unfortunately. They did not make it back. So this occurred, they left on this vacation August 2nd of 1982. So I was just about 3 years old, and I have no memory of this, but
I was almost conceived in a couple of months after that.
Oh, wow. So you were negative years.
Because I was born in 83.
Yes. So what occurred here, August 2nd, they leave on this vacation. And they go deep into the woods. I'm talking like they're at this Wells Gray park near Clearwater, which is, it's very desolate. There's a mountain, there's some mountains, there's, it's extremely isolated and desolate, and they like to be really isolated. They like to find the most isolated camping area they could. It was just kind of their style.
They found it to be thrilling or something?
Yes, and they had been there multiple times. This was not their first rodeo at this camp area, this whole big park area. So anyways, they leave on August 2nd, 1982. They're last heard from August 6th, so they must have made a phone call to a relative or something. They're last heard from August 6th. And then August 16th, Bob did not show up for work. And that's when kind of the red flags went up.
Right, because we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
Because it's, if you don't show up for work,
right,
then,
crisis.
That's not normal for most people.
Right.
To
To
not
just
show up for work.
no call, no show.
Right.
Unless it's somebody's normal MO type of a thing. But usually they don't last very long.
Right.
Yeah. So this person, no called, no showed, and he's like super dependable, and suddenly he's not there. But not only can they not find him, they cannot find his wife, his children, her Jackie's parents. So they're all missing, right? So of course they call the authorities, and it's in the middle of nowhere, so they start with just the bare bones who's available, and then they ramp up. They get everybody from Vancouver coming in, and then they get the RCMP on board too. So you've got like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police just roaming around the woods. And so anyways, so
they knew where they had gone.
They did not know which campsite or anything like that. They knew which
general
giant nature preserve area they were in. This is like a giant woods, mountains.
Like a state park, but in Canada.
Right, but bigger than what we have here. Like huge. So they knew they were in that area, but it's not like this is 82. It's not like they could have a cell phone and be like, oh, we're here. You know what I mean? Like there was no GPSing. No, they were just wherever they were in this park. So of course that's concerning. It's like they could be lost in the woods. They could be, who the heck knows? Injured or whatever. Yeah. So they go and they're looking for these people. Finally, with all the searching and everything, the first thing they find is this burned out car. And they look inside, like the front seat, and they see bones. They just see these bones, and they're thinking they've got one person. Of course, they look on the other side. They're like, oh, we got two. We got two people.
Where was this now?
They find this in the woods of the nature preserve. They find this burned out car. And it's tucked way in. So they're thinking, and it's in a weird area. Like they're thinking, at first they're thinking whoever did this got to be local. Like they knew this weird area where nobody would go. You know what I mean? And then they found it, but it took quite a while to find the car. It was several days. Okay. So they find this car. It's driven off the side of the road. They find these bones, and of course they're realizing this is probably the family, right?
So if they've already decomposed the bones, or was it just because they burned?
They burned. Okay. There was an accelerant. Gasoline was used, and the car was burned.
Got it.
At first they think too, well, when the medical examiner came and they looked through the car and all the people went through, they found that it was all 6. So all 6 had been burned alive, or, we hope not burned alive, but they were burned in this vehicle. So, of course...
Probably not burned alive.
I hope they were burned alive. Not. No, I don't think they were, but I don't,
They couldn't figure that out?
It depends on the scenario. No, I think they kind of do. Well, so anyways,
I guess
there's bones in this car. It looks like it's 2 people. Well, then they were like, oh, it's 4 people. They opened the trunk. It's the girls. And they said it was just 2 little skulls. Just so sad. The saddest thing in the world. So then at that point, it's not one of the family members.
Right.
Going off the rails.
Unless it was it couldn't have been. I was going to say the last family member, but they wouldn't have been able to burn themselves.
Right, exactly. So they knew it probably wasn't a family member, because that's what I was thinking at first. Oh, it's probably someone went off the rails, and you know what I mean?
Well, because to take over an entire group of people,
right, 6 people.
But I suppose some of them are kids and some of them are elderly, so that might play into it.
Right, exactly. So they're thinking, okay, this is someone local. So the family, or one thing to note is that George had a weapon in the trunk of his car.
George is the father?
George is or
the grandpa?
The grandpa.
Okay.
He had a gun. So the thing that was missing, that was most notable, is their truck and camper were missing.
Okay.
And this was like an old style, like one of those, I'm trying to describe this, one of those 80s ones where you got your big truck and then over it lays the camper. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's like real old school camper type deal, and it was like this disgusting green army color. Okay, I mean, it was this bad color.
Yeah,
okay.
You don't have to insult dead people's color choices, Laura.
Well, I'm not trying to.
Kind of rude.
But it was a vomit green color. It was a bad color. Okay, but anyways, it maybe it was popular at the time. I don't know. Must have been too.
Probably.
Yeah, probably popular at the time. So some things to note. They found. And at first they weren't exactly sure how they died, but they did on autopsy find that one of the skulls did have a bullet in the skull. So, they were fairly certain that they had been shot, or some of them had been shot. They weren't 100% sure. So, so they're trying to figure this out. They've got officers, going through the woods, and in the town of Clearwater, they've got... they're trying to, make people aware of what's going on, and everybody's freaked out. And this wilderness officer that had been staying like deep in the woods says he saw a camper matching that description earlier, like days earlier. And then they're like, why didn't you say something? You know what I mean? It's because he didn't know about the murders yet. He was deep in the woods.
Matching what description?
That description. So he saw it, like, parked, and then it moved. You know what I mean?
He saw a camper. I'm thinking you're saying a camper like a person.
Oh, no.
That's why I was like, matching what description?
Yeah.
I get
it.
The
same camper. He saw it at some point in his camping, but he wasn't able to tell them because he didn't have a cell phone at the time, TV, So once he knew about the murders, then he came and said, yeah, I did see this truck. So they went there thinking, okay, well, maybe we can get some more information. They went to where he saw this truck. It was the camper. Mm-hmm. And at the site, they find George Bentley's cigarette butts and 6 .22 caliber shells. So they have found the campsite that they used. And that's how they found
22 is a very small caliber gun.
Yeah, it is.
And actually, it's one of the... If you're going to survive a gunshot wound, you want to be shot with a 22.
Well, good. I'll note that for
something I learned.
When that happens, I'll be like, what are you shooting me with? Oh, a 22? Okay, that's I'll take that. Compared to whatever else you have there. Yeah. So at this point, they're like, we found the campsite, but of course the truck and camper are still missing. This is like a huge honking thing. In my head, though, I'm thinking they probably like sunk it or something like that. I mean, there's water everywhere. You know what I mean? Like maybe they sunk it. But then I'm looking at the thing going, that is the most massive...
Well, yeah, it's not like they're not going to just roam around in that.
No.
And people are going to notice.
Well, yeah. And then so then they're thinking, okay, so what we need to do next, we need to go to the media and report on this missing truck and camper, like to Canadians, Right. So they used this terrible sketch of the camper, right? screen sketch. And then people are calling from all over saying they're seeing this thing, right? A waitress reports she saw two men, French Canadian, didn't speak much English.
She saw two men French kissing.
Oh no!
Sorry.
I mean, maybe, but that's not what she said.
The
She
80s.
said it's the 80s. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, but they were French Canadian.
Okay.
They didn't speak much English apparently. They
Okay.
were not fluent, so she knew some. Their French accent. They were probably French Canadian. And so she saw them at this. Yeah, exactly.
J'ai un rendez-vous avec Guy
Exactly.
dans
And she's like,
minutes.
I don't know what you're saying, kind of a thing,
Yeah.
because she's not from there. Well, anyways, it turned out about 300 people saw this camper, and they're tracking it moving across, right? And so they're like, oh, they're going back to Quebec. You know what I mean? They're like, we've got to do this. So then they go as far, and I'm sorry, but but then I had to think back, this is the 1980s. They got a mock camper. Like, they found a camper that looked identical to it, and they put a sign on the side of it saying, if you see this, report it to the authorities. And they put it at various malls throughout Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was like one of their strategies.
Okay.
So that's apparently, it's an 80s thing.
Yeah.
Apparently. And I'd be just shocked, like, oh, okay.
It's interesting.
And so then authorities, of course, during this time, they're believing, okay, they're on their way back to Quebec. And at that time, they even had this mechanic say somewhere, along that route that they were trying to get a paint job for this camper, right? And they had asked him if he could get rid of a 22. And of course, he said, no, I can't do that for you, but you should go to Detroit. So, he goes, I've been in trouble with the law before, I'm not going to get involved, is what he told these guys. He said, but you should go to Detroit. They'll do that for you. They'll paint your camper.
So he gave some advice.
They gave him some advice. Yeah, yep, good, some solid
They didn't
advice.
call the police and say, hey.
Well, he did, but not till later.
Not till they had already left
yes.
the scene. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And then he told them where he told them to go, So then they're getting all these authorities in the United States on board. They're like, we've got these murders of six coming to you.
Detroit is right across
and you can't just, like, drive over with the Canadian police. Like, we're here to arrest you, They had to get our police on board. It was this whole big production. So then they go to Detroit. I mean, there's this whole thing, right? So the bummer of this all is they spent these weeks and weeks, going through this, trying to find this camper, and they're tracking it everywhere. Well, it turns out ultimately they find it at the park on top of the mountain.
Oh my gosh.
So they've done aerial searches and everything. So they're tracking it. They're going to Detroit, the whole shebang.
These people
the whole time
reporting that they are trying to paint the camper like that was all just a red herring.
Right. Like, I don't know if it's different people, but it was such a bizarre looking camper that I don't know how. I mean, it had a boat on top of it too.
Well, I mean, it doesn't like we
Canoe.
said beforehand. Like, it doesn't make sense that somebody would continue roaming around in such a
high profile vehicle at that time, and it sticks out. This isn't like just a
I mean, I could see maybe driving around like in their car, but the car was burned.
Right.
So, because if their car is just like a sedan or something like that.
Right.
But in a huge, massive camper, like you'd think. I mean, maybe if they just needed to get out of there, and then they would ditch it somewhere else. But,
yeah. But obviously they didn't go to Detroit and then back to this place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not what happened. It just had been there the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I was like, wow, that really stinks. And of course, they were not happy. The lead investigator was not super thrilled about that. So now he's back to a local suspect. He's like, it's in a place where it was hidden really well. You had to know the area to put it there. Like, it was just that kind of a place. And then they did find a bullet hole in the side of the camper. Now they decide they're going to keep it quiet. They're going to keep it out of the media that they have found the camper. They're going to keep it out of the media because they're going to start knocking on some local doors, right?
Okay. Canvassing the neighborhood.
But this isn't a neighborhood. These are like weird little shacky cabins.
Oh,
like
sure, yeah.
nobody's around, so you go to one shacky cabin, and then like 3 miles down, you go to the other shacky cabin. Yeah, so they get to one, and there's this detective knocks on the door, and the guy that comes out, he is described on websites as well as in the episode I watched of the case that haunts me, I think it was. Anyways, he's depicted as very creepy. Like, this is a super creepy dude. They open it up, the door, and his wife is standing next to him, and he won't let her speak. You know what I mean? He's like one of those guys that like try to ask her a question, and he's like, no. Like, this is the deal. Well, anyway, she, during the conversation, interjects, aren't you going to tell him? And of course, he's like, no, you be quiet. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so what they did was this officer waited until he left, went back, and she says to the officer that this guy that they know named David Shearing mentioned that he found a van in the woods with a bullet hole in it.
Okay.
So then he's like, okay, David Shearing. So David Shearing was working in the woods. He just works in the woods. He just kind of does odd jobs in the woods, okay? And
okay.
Well, he does. That's what he does. And he's also got this lengthy...
So if you're looking for a job,
yes.
Just roam around in the woods and you might find work.
You might find work, because he did. Well, he would like stumble upon like groups of loggers, and he'd be like, "Can I log with you for a little bit?" And
it was a different time.
It was a different time, yeah. And then they'd be like, "Sure, you can log with us for a job," and then they'd be like, "Okay, you can leave now." And then he'd go find another whatever. So anyway, that's how he lived. But he had kind of this weird. It was a very strange, kind of a violent, kind of weird criminal record. So they were like, okay, that makes it a little more, light bulbs going off. And the suspect lived about 3 miles away from the crime scene.
Oh, dear.
But when they went to go find him, he had moved to a new construction site. So then they, of course, found him. The detective approaches him real friendly, and he was suspected of also this other vehicular type of homicide that had occurred in that area, in the park. And so the detective starts talking about that to kind of throw him off. And of course, he's like, wasn't this, I don't know, his a little slower, maybe something was a little off, because of course he right away confesses to it. He's like, it was an accident though, and it might have been. They knew that what had happened might have been an accident. He said the guy was drunk, he hit him, he died, and he regrets it. You know what I mean? Like, that's, and then he starts going into approaches him about the Johnson murders. And he implicates himself by saying, I don't like Bear Creek campsite. I would never go there. Well, they had never released that to the media.
It's an episode of Dumb Criminals.
Exactly. He's like, I don't like Bear Creek campsite. And then, of course, and right away he regretted saying that.
He's like, whoa.
Yeah, and that's, of course, where they were.
Can I take that back?
Exactly. I didn't say that. Yeah. Then nobody in the media knew, so then he asks for a lawyer, and the guy's like, no, come on here. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you're caught. So then he finally admits to kind of stumbling, toward the families, watching them at their campsite. They're having s'mores and everything, and one by one shoots them out of the woods.
Jeez.
And, yeah, and of course, the question is why. He goes, I wanted their stuff. And he's like, okay. He's like, I wanted their boat, their boat motor and their tools, and he's like, I sold them or whatever. So that was it. So he's sentenced in Canada law. He's sentenced to 25 years without parole, which is Canada's toughest sentence that you can get.
It's nuts.
Yeah. So, yeah, but he's still in prison because he did not. His appeals aren't working, or his not appeals, but his probation. He's not. You know, they're not going for it because he killed 6 people. He's not
for parole.
eligible. Well, he's eligible now because it's been 25 years.
Oh. Okay.
But they keep denying it. They're
Okay.
denying it. They keep denying it. But later, like, it must have been years later, the head detective came to him and he said, you know, it's always bugged me that you said that, you know, like, was there something else? Was there someone else involved? Like, nobody does that. They don't kill 6 people for these tools and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, so later, that what he really wanted was to be with the girls. He sexually abused the girls, and he kept them alive for 9 to 10 days. That was the real reason the whole time.
Oh.
But he didn't admit that till years later.
So it was
It was a sexually motivated crime that he tried to pass off
as a robbery.
As a robbery, as a weird robbery. Yeah. So that is sad. Thankfully, they did catch him. I mean, yeah, I mean, they would have caught him eventually. He was not... And he was telling people, too. He's like, I found it, you know?
Jeez.
Yeah, so that's a lot of people. I mean, that really shocked me. The amount of people, the family, you know, like...
Well, and like, can you imagine you're just chilling at your campsite
Yes.
and somebody just starts...
Right.
And you're like...
Right. But it turns out he'd killed the 4 adults right away. Like, bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang, bang.
I was going to say, he probably had been
Kept it-
maybe watched them a little bit.
He did,
and,
yeah.
and saw the girls there.
Right.
Well, that's like that Charlotte Senna in upstate New York.
Oh, yeah.
That just recently they got her back.
Yeah.
And it sounded like that guy wasn't the smartest bulb on the tree because
No.
he left his fingerprint on the ransom note.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People
Had
are
he
real-
not done that,
Oh, they might not have ever
I don't
caught
think they
him.
would have ever found her.
No.
I mean, that's just bonkers.
It is. It is. But yeah, this guy was not a...
Well, I had never heard
Scientist.
that case at all.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a very sad case out of Canada. It was a lot of people. That's what really shocked me was... And then when they said he did it for tools and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh. Like I'm never going camping again. I was like, jeez. Like,
Yikes.
yeah. Especially one of them had a gun, too. That didn't help, you know.
Well, I mean, when that's a gun for protection is only going to really help you if
you know
you
of
have
the
some
threat.
advanced
Right.
warning of the threat. Exactly.
Right, and they didn't.
All right. Well, that was a pretty quick case,
It
but
was a pretty quick case.
mine's of course usually not. So
That's all right.
okay, so I am covering the murder or suicide of Rebecca Zahau. So this is probably one of the most frustrating stories because just when you think, oh, there's no way she committed suicide, then you kind of think, well, but maybe she did, and then kind of vice versa. You think, oh, that she had to have been, murdered, and then it's just like this back and forth because so much of this case doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, yeah, it's a crazy case.
Oh.
So anyhow,
Interesting.
Rebecca Zahau was born March 15th, 1979, same year as you.
Okay.
She was 32 years old at the time when she died on July 13th, 2011.
About 12 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. So, she was a Burmese American, and she lived in Coronado, California at the Spreckels mansion with her boyfriend, Jonah Shacknai.
Okay.
So Rebecca had been married once previously, but she had no children from that marriage, and it sounds like it was a fairly amicable divorce. And then her boyfriend, Jonah, and Rebecca had been together for about 3 years at the time of her death. And Rebecca had been working as a ophthalmic tech for like a I don't know if Lens Crafters or one of those places.
Oh, yeah.
And she quit in 2010 because Jonah Shacknai actually was, by some accounts, a billionaire, but for sure a multimillionaire.
Sure.
He was the founder of a pharmaceutical company that was very successful. So I think she really didn't need to work.
Right.
So at some point she just decided not to work anymore.
Right.
And so Jonah had 3 children. Okay. He had 2 previous marriages. She was 32. I believe he was quite a bit older than her. I'm not sure exactly of his age, but definitely older than that. And his first marriage had 2 children, and so those kids were significantly older than his 3rd child.
Oh, okay.
And there was some custody issues with that first wife, but I think those kids primarily lived with the mother.
Okay.
And then he had a 6-year-old son named Max Shacknai, and Max, he had like joint custody of Max. And so, Max would be at the house, and Rebecca, because Jonah worked a lot, Rebecca would be his primary caregiver.
Which makes
when
sense. Yeah.
Max was at their house.
Yeah.
And so everybody said, Rebecca and Max had a very, close relationship, and that they got along and there were no issues there. But he was 6 years old at that time.
Okay.
So the Spreckels mansion is like this massive property in Coronado, California. I mean, when your house has a name, it's it's a pretty
hoity-toity place.
Yeah, like 27 bedrooms or something like that.
And it was all theirs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This was actually their summer property. This happened in the summertime. So I believe, I know that there was some connections to Arizona. So I don't know if they maybe lived in Arizona in the winter.
Oh, sure.
And Rebecca's family was actually from Missouri. So, and I believe she had grown up in Missouri.
Oh, sure.
So, the son Max was a product of Jonah Shacknai's second marriage to a woman named Dina Shacknai. I think she just kept her married name.
Right.
And so Dina is Max's biological mom, and she's in the picture in terms of helping to raise him and whatnot.
Right.
And sorry, I already talked about him being wealthy. It's in my notes. So in order to really understand this case, you have to go back about 2 days before Rebecca died. And because there was a pretty big incident that happened. So Rebecca was at the mansion with Max, and Rebecca had a much younger sister named Zena, who was 13 years old.
Okay.
And Zena was visiting from out of town.
Yeah.
And so it was Rebecca and Zena and then Max. And Rebecca was there watching Max because Jonah was at work.
Right.
And Rebecca said that she hadn't seen Max in roughly, 20 or 30 minutes. And so she said she was going to the bathroom, and she was just kind of thinking about the fact that she hadn't seen him in a while.
Right.
Now, granted, a 6-year-old, I mean, I can see that, like, especially in a huge place like that.
Right.
He's off doing his own thing.
Right.
And so she's in the bathroom, and she's like, well, I decided after I got out of the bathroom that I would go at least lay eyes on him.
Right.
Like,
here he is. Okay,
make sure he's
good.
okay, see if he needs anything, all of that. So she finishes up in the bathroom, and she starts walking around the house, and she finally, she's not finding him at first, and she happens upon a pretty horrific scene. And she can see that Max had fallen face first over the second floor banister.
Oh, no.
And so he's lying there, like, in the middle of the floor, unconscious.
Wow.
And so Rebecca, of course, was frantic. She had asked her sister Zena to call 911 so she could go attend to him.
Yeah.
So she goes down to the first floor. Now, some accounts say he just likely fell, like he was running and probably fell over the banister.
Launched over.
And then I've heard other accounts saying there was some kind of motorized scooter at the scene.
Oh.
Like he was playing with that. But I can't, it's hard to verify which is correct.
Right.
It doesn't really matter, but...
he ended up over the banister.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, paramedics arrived at the scene, and Rebecca had already started CPR on Max. He was, but he was completely unconscious. Taken to the hospital, and he was put on life support and was in critical condition with spinal and facial injuries. So it wasn't a good. I don't think they initially knew what the prognosis was going to be exactly, because they knew Rebecca had started CPR, so the paramedics got Max's heart back beating, but they didn't know, because Rebecca hadn't seen him in 30 minutes, they don't know when the accident occurred within that time frame, so it could have been 5 minutes without oxygen. It could have been
20,
a lot longer than that.
Right.
So I think they were pretty careful about saying, like they said, yeah, this is serious, he's in critical condition, but I don't think they said right away, like, oh, he's going to die.
Right.
They just kind of...
They didn't know yet.
Yeah, they didn't know, exactly. So, of course, Rebecca was really upset about the whole incident.
Yeah,
I mean,
course.
who wouldn't be?
Well, yeah.
So,
devastating.
The next day, on July 12th, Rebecca brings her sister Zena to the airport for her to go back to Missouri, because that was the plan all along.
Right.
And then,
plus, she's like, with this tragedy and everything, get her away from this. She's pretty young.
Mm-hmm. So Rebecca picks up Adam Shacknai, which is Jonah's brother, from the airport at the same time as she's dropping her sister off, because Jonah has a brother named Adam who decides to fly into town. Okay. He lived in a different state, I believe.
Okay.
I think Arizona, actually, and he flew into town because of the situation with Max, which completely makes sense.
Yes.
So Rebecca and Jonah and Adam all had dinner together that evening, and then Jonah returned to the hospital to be at Max's bedside, and then Max's biological mother, Dina, was also back at the hospital to be at the bedside.
Right.
And then Rebecca and Adam returned to the mansion.
Right.
So Rebecca is... she goes back to the mansion, and Adam is actually staying in the guest house, which is behind the house. Okay. So it's like not attached to the house. It's like its own entity.
Right.
And
for privacy or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, that's understandable also.
Yeah.
And, sorry, I'm missing page 3 here. Well, anyway, I'll have to wing it. So, Adam comes out of his guest house the next morning. So Rebecca did her own thing in the house. He's in the guest house, and he said about 6:40 in the morning he comes out, and he's gonna go to the main house to get some coffee.
Right.
So he emerges from the guest house, starts walking towards the main house, and he sees Rebecca hanging from the balcony.
Oh.
By her, her neck.
Right.
And she's naked, and she's gagged, and she's bound by her wrists and ankles. And she's just hanging there, looking not like she's not alive.
Right.
And so, of course, he immediately runs towards her.
Right.
To help her. And so he's calling police. Now, I was going to play the 911 call, but there's only like a really small part in the beginning, and then the audio gets really muffled because he's like doing things at the same time.
Right.
But I will say, when he calls 911, he's like, there's a girl, and she's like, almost like he's saying, you would think he didn't even know her.
Right.
Which is bizarre, but at the same time, he's probably shocked at the same time. So
you're just kind of speaking, your brain's going so fast
that
you can't.
So a lot of people thought that the way he acts on the 911 call is suspicious, but really that's the only part of it that I thought was a little strange.
Right.
So he ends up cutting her down because she's hanging, and he does try to do CPR with the dispatcher.
I'm not understanding the whole suicide angle on this, but okay. Yep. Okay.
Well, so she's hanging like
no, I get that.
Yeah.
But she's bound.
She's bound and gagged, yes, by her
Gagged.
feet and ankles.
Yes.
Not her feet and ankles, her hands, arms, and
How
feet.
is this possible?
We're going to get into all that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So,
I'm thinking.
of course, I guess at some point Adam texted Jonah to say, because he's on the phone with 911, to let him know what's happening.
Right.
And so, of course, the police come, obviously, to investigate what's happening.
Right.
And initially, police are supposed to treat everything like a homicide until you know that it's not a homicide.
Yes.
But it sounds like once they got the information that this accident had happened with Max, they kind of started to shift into thinking, I think this is a suicide.
Right.
Because she was just involved in this horrible incident.
Right.
So I don't
give
think
it the right attention.
They weren't objective.
The type of attention it
right.
should have had. Yeah.
So when they're investigating the scene, there was a note written in paint on the door of the bedroom where the balcony was in.
Okay.
And it says, "She saved him. Can you save her?" Written in black paint.
That's really... She saved him.
Can you save her?
Can you save her?
Now, this for me is doesn't make any bit of sense. Because, okay, if there's... I'm assuming whoever is written this is saying she saved him, meaning Rebecca saved Max.
Right.
Can you save her? But at that...
It sounds like a second or third party is out there.
Right, but Rebecca didn't save Max. But at that point in time, they didn't really know.
Right. She may have saved him, or whatever.
Then they initially thought that... I guess at first they were... Because when they at first thought Max might survive... So then Max's mom and everybody was like, well, if he does survive, that's to your credit because you did CPR and everything else. But at that point in time, he was still in critical condition. So that message just doesn't make much sense.
It really doesn't, no.
And another thing is she was naked, and everybody said she was real modest.
Yeah,
people
don't generally commit suicide buck naked.
Right. And
I mean, it's not...
And all her family and stuff are like, she would have been horrified to be found by the paramedics in a naked state.
Right.
So there was that. There's the weird paint. Now she was a painter, I guess, not professionally, but she did paint.
Paintings. Yeah.
And another weird aspect of the crime is there was a knife found at the scene, and although there was no foreign DNA on the knife, nobody else's DNA except for Adam, who had done some CPR and stuff, whose DNA, but nobody's DNA was found in the bedroom other than Rebecca's.
Okay.
But there was this knife, and the knife actually had menstrual blood on the handle as if it had been inserted into her.
What, was she menstruating at the time?
I believe she was, yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, she was menstruating, but why would she put a knife handle in her?
She wouldn't do that. I mean, if you're about to hurt yourself, why?
So, there's all these weird things. But they do their investigation, and the medical examiner declares it a suicide.
Oh, okay.
And I think a lot of it's based on the circumstances with...
I feel like they should have gotten a new, they should have done it so that it was its own independent...
Yes, they really screwed it up.
Case.
So they did look into her cell phone records, and so Rebecca was talking on the phone to her sister Mary, who's older than her, from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., and Mary said she sounded fine other than upset about the situation, as you would expect. But
she
not...
wasn't I'm gonna do this?
Right, nothing Now, granted, people don't always say that they're gonna do that when they're gonna do it, but... Another weird thing is Rebecca received a text message from Nina Romano. Now, Nina...
Who's that?
So, Dina is Max's mother.
Okay.
Dina has a twin sister named Nina.
Oh, Dina and Nina. Okay.
So, Nina, not Dina, so this is the sister...
Twin sister of Max's
texted Rebecca like 10 or 11 p.m. at night, asking if she could stop by so they could talk about Max's accident.
That doesn't make any sense.
And Rebecca did not respond. As you can imagine, like, she doesn't even know this person.
Right.
And she's probably already really not in a great place at that point in time. And they don't even know if Max is going to live or die at that point.
Right.
So she just didn't answer.
No.
Now,
like,
another...
who is this person?
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so her last phone activity was a voicemail that was left on her phone at 12:50 a.m. Apparently the message was from Jonah, but the message was deleted and not recoverable.
Oh, no.
Police have said that the message was Jonah updating her on Max's worsening condition. However, I tried to find, because Jonah's been interviewed,
right,
and I can't find anywhere of Jonah actually saying that, yes, this is what I said on the message.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost like, because to me, if he called and was like, look, first of all, why doctors are not going to be updating people at 1 o'clock in the morning of a condition unless he's going to imminently die.
Right.
Which wasn't the case.
Right.
Because I will tell you now, Max ended up passing away about 3 days after Rebecca died.
Okay.
So it seems weird that he would just call her at like 1 o'clock and be like,
this is the update for the, yeah.
Right. But the reason that's so important is because a lot of people are saying, well, if she did commit suicide, then she might have heard this message of, yeah, Max is probably going to pass away, and then, like, that was the catalyst to her suicide.
Right. Or he could have been saying something like, you didn't watch my son, now I'm leaving you.
Exactly. That's
get out of the house type of a situation.
Of course, and it's like, you would think he would just say, this is what I said, but it's like you can't really get that information from him. It's weird.
That's very odd.
So Rebecca's family they're basically like, there is no way she committed suicide. Now, granted, families often do not want to admit that.
Yep.
People that think she killed herself explain the menstrual blood and the being naked as a cultural thing and a way of like her humiliating herself because she felt so guilty.
Yeah, well, did she really think that deeply into it? Like, this is my culture.
I'm just telling you that that's what people say.
Okay.
And,
well, I mean, that's an interesting theory anyway.
But a lot of people think she was murdered. Now,
I feel that way at this point.
So the family, you know, they were kind of suspicious of Adam Shacknai, who had found her, because they had been at the house alone together. So now there's some really interesting things about Adam Shacknai that end up coming out.
Oh, sure.
So in 2018, so 7 years after the murder, when Rebecca's family realized, like, no one's going to be criminally charged at this point, so they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Adam Shacknai to hold him legally responsible for her death. So this would be a legal, you know, they would be rewarded damages.
Right. It's a civil case.
It's not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
The jury just has to be a majority. It doesn't have to be unanimous.
Right.
And they're awarded some kind of monetary amount if the jury decides in favor of the family.
Right.
So this Dr. Wecht, and I've heard of him, he's like a pretty famous pathologist, was hired by Rebecca's family to kind of give a fresh look at the case.
Right.
And so there were fractures in Rebecca's throat, which she was hanging by her throat, so you would expect that. But this doctor thought those fractures were more consistent with manual strangulation.
Okay, which, yeah.
Well, of course, the other doctor was saying, no, these were caused by the hanging.
Oh.
The fact that her hands and feet were bound, apparently they did reenact, and technically it's possible that she could have bound her own hands and feet and done all of that.
Gotten over that?
And yeah, apparently. But it's like, it would be difficult.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's not likely. I mean, come on.
So the family, of course, believes that knife being found that had been inserted into her vagina is definitely indicative of a sexual assault.
Right.
And that message being painted on the door, they said they don't believe that was her handwriting. Now, of course, experts are like, when something is written in paint, it's really difficult to tell who wrote it.
Right.
So there's not a lot to say there. And then, of course, the fact that she was nude.
Right.
So, Adam... Oh, there's my page 3. So, Adam... Okay, so another thing I didn't mention before. So, the knots that were tied on her wrists and ankles were extremely complicated knots. Like, something that you would have to have, like, a skill.
How can you complete that, though? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like, when you don't have one...
I don't know. They did. There's a lot of shows have covered this case.
Yes.
And there's one on ID that they do like a whole reenactment of everything to try. And it's those two guys that do the show. Remember they did the one of OJ, is OJ innocent?
Oh, yeah, yes.
They did this case as well.
Yeah.
And so they said, like technically they were able to, they found a girl that was her size and they had her do the whole thing. But these knots were so complex that they said, you would have expected to see like a search for a YouTube on how to tie a certain knot or a Google search. And there was none of that.
Was she like a professional sailor or something?
She wasn't, but you know who was a tugboat captain? Adam Shacknai.
Shacknai.
Yeah. So
I think Adam was mad about what happened.
And they were nautical knots.
Yep.
That's what they were
So she wouldn't have just known how to do nautical knots on her own. She wasn't like an experienced boat person.
Right.
Yep.
Now, another
sailor.
So that was pretty incriminating against Adam. And then the other thing was a couple of hours before he found Rebecca, there were searches on his computer, his laptop that he had brought with him, for Asian bondage porn.
Oh.
And Rebecca was Asian.
Yeah. Oh.
So he had been watching that like a few hours before she was found.
Yeah, this is not...
So,
I mean, I think we could...
And he said he was embarrassed and that it, like... People that don't think he did it, because his brother Jonah doesn't believe that he did it. And
of course not, it's his brother.
But get this, Dina Shacknai, Max's mom, doesn't think Adam did it either, but she thinks that Max was murdered and Rebecca was murdered.
Oh, they were both murdered by... Well, and it could... I was thinking in the back of my head, it could have been some kind of maintenance worker at the house. There could be some kind of... I'm sure they have maids. I'm sure they've got lawn people and all the maintenance people.
I mean, maybe, but why kill a little kid like that?
Maybe he's a sick person, you know what I mean? Like, think about that, though. That could be. Did they ever talk about that? Like, I'm sure there had to be maybe 10 or so people in charge of that place.
Yeah, I guess that never really came up that I've seen, but it'd
be interesting to know who those people were and what their backgrounds were like.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's probably been explored. I'm not aware of it.
Sure.
So Rebecca's family won a civil judgment for $5 million. The jury found in favor of the family 9-3 for that civil case.
Wow.
And the house was heavily insured.
Right.
So it ended up, although they won the civil case, Adam Shacknai, the insurance company, ended up paying out a settlement.
Oh, sure.
And because the family said all along, like, they didn't really want the money, that they wanted her name cleared from as having committed suicide.
Right.
And so the family ended up getting like $600,000 from an insurance payout through the house insurance. And so Adam Shacknai, he's the brother of Jonah, who Jonah believes he's innocent. So money is of no thing to them. I mean, he's a
Right.
billionaire.
Right.
So even if they would have gotten a $5 million loss or settlement, I'm sure Jonah would have just paid it for him.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because he
Yeah.
doesn't believe he did it. So
Right.
it really, other than like his reputation, of course,
Right.
and of course, and if he didn't do it, that is really horrible.
That is.
You know?
I mean, it is. It's very sad, but, you know, if his brother was actually at the hospital and they can prove that, no, he was there, which they must.
Yeah,
have that
Jonah
record
and
or whatever.
Dina were both at the hospital.
Right.
All
so
night.
Who else would there be? It would either be him or some, like, rogue maintenance
Or a
person.
suicide.
Or a suicide,
Yeah.
but I just know it's too much. It's too
Um,
much. You're not. That's so complicated. When you're in that kind of state of mind, how could you even do all those things? I mean, I don't know. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I can't say for sure. Obviously, I wasn't there, but
the only thing I think is weird is, like, let's say Adam Shacknai was attracted to Rebecca and wanted to have sex with her, and she refuted his advances.
well, on that day though,
Right.
with what's going on,
But his DNA, other than, like, his DNA was not found anywhere in that bedroom that she would have gone into. You know what I mean? The balcony was off of the bedroom. She had gone through that. Because the ligature was tied to a piece of furniture in that bedroom
okay,
to, like, anchor it.
okay,
And then it was like a bedpost.
right,
And then, so there was no indication that anyone else had been in that room other than her in terms of DNA.
right. But
So-
if they wore gloves or if they,
Well, yeah.
you know what I mean?
Then it would have
Like-
had to have been pretty meticulously planned out,
Right.
I feel.
right,
She had no, like, semen or body fluids that they found.
right. Condom. I mean, you know.
Yeah,
who
there
knows?
are a lot of possibilities. But, so this is, the crazy part is this has been ruled a suicide, and the family just is like, we just want it to be undetermined.
Right,
Even if you don't want to say it's a murder,
right.
let's get it changed to undetermined, because if it's undetermined, it can still be investigated.
Right.
But if it's closed as a suicide, then it can't even be investigated,
Right.
and that's where it stands at this point in time.
Right, they won't change it.
Right.
It's very hard to get them to change it.
A medical examiner's
Medical
rule, and that's what's
examiner.
going on with the Ellen Greenberg case.
Oh,
You should
yeah.
look into that one, because I think I might do
Little
that one
heard of
next.
that.
But she clearly didn't commit suicide. Like that,
No.
the Ellen Greenberg case for
She
me
did not.
is like even more apparent that she didn't commit suicide than
Right.
Rebecca Zahau.
No, there's multiple cases like that, actually.
I mean, she had stab wounds in the back of her neck and head.
right. Well,
like-
yeah, you can't.
I mean, you can technically, but I mean,
It's, again, technically, I think that they are ruling suicide too quickly because this keeps happening.
and a lot of times if it's not a suicide, it's going to implicate a prominent person.
Right.
Like in Ellen Greenberg's fiance, who likely, if she was murdered, a lot of people think it was him. His uncle was a really prominent judge in Philadelphia.
Right.
So, and he called his uncle before he called the police.
Right.
And then in Rebecca Zahau's case, you've got these, Jonah Shacknai is a billionaire.
Right.
And his brother, I think was doing fine for himself too. So you've got these extremely wealthy people that are known to the community. So I feel like they're more quick to, we don't want to leave this hanging
Right.
because
Just
we don't want to have issues with, these
these
prominent people.
Right.
But yeah, just when I think the thing that note in the paint
Yes.
is really baffling to me, because, okay, if she did commit suicide, I feel like, and she would say something like, I couldn't save him.
Right. Right.
Can you save me?
I tried to.
But the
save
fact
him,
that it
so
says
you try to save me,
she-
something like that.
She saved him. Can you save her? Is like it's somebody else.
Right. That's
But
what
then,
I
if it was
feel.
someone else, why would they want to implicate themselves if they're trying
Right.
to stage it as a suicide?
Right.
So, like, that doesn't make,
No,
none of it makes
it
any kind of
doesn't make
sense.
sense at all.
None of it does.
No.
And then it's like, And the whole naked thing, okay, you can say, like, yeah, maybe she was trying to humiliate herself because she felt she was just so devastated and was punishing herself because she was in this, maybe she was in,
psychotic.
a state of mind where she was so upset with herself.
Right.
You know, like, maybe she didn't watch, like, deep down she knew she didn't watch him as close as she should have been.
Right. Well,
you know, like, maybe she was watching
guilt,
a TV show or playing on her phone, or, you know what I mean? And, like, she just had this internal guilt that she knew she would never be able to get over.
Right.
At least she felt that way at the time.
Someone could have made her do it, too.
Here's another thought I actually had, is what if she enlisted Adam Shacknai's help?
Right.
And said, hey, look, I'm doing this either way.
Right.
And
wouldn't he have come out with that by now,
you would think, but
I'm saying maybe he made her do it. He said, you know, he was standing in there and he's like, this is what you're gonna do.
But then that's still a murder.
Well, right, that's what I mean. It's just a different type of murder, you know.
But I think even, like, she maybe was, like, telling him, like, hey, I can't go on like this, and she maybe said, like,
he might have made her feel really bad too,
like, can you help me do this? And, you know, she maybe had no intention of, because that's the thing, everybody said, you know, if she killed herself, she wouldn't want to have someone else implicated in her death.
No.
You know, like, she wouldn't want to, like, ruin someone else's life.
Right.
So that's why that note becomes so important, I think, because she wouldn't have written a note like that if she's trying to make it look like a suicide.
Right, exactly, because it makes it look like it could be not a suicide.
Right. And then the whole, like, the naked thing and the knife, like, she would have had to have known that people are not going to necessarily, or maybe she didn't think it through, though. You know what I mean? Like,
she was so out of it, but I don't know. The whole thing seems very...
It's a very strange story.
Yes.
And, like, I guess the police were saying, you know, the police that are trying to, you know, defend their suicide ruling or, like, agreeing with the medical examiner, I guess they found, like, journals where she said that she was, like, felt like she had lost her identity because she wasn't working anymore and she was just staying home all day, you know, and she just kind of felt like she didn't have much of a purpose.
Right.
And, you know, her family denies she was depressed, but I guess these journal entries kind of make it seem like maybe she was.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know. It's a really...
But to jump to that dramatic of a suicide is a little...
It's very odd.
Yeah.
And it, like when they did the reenactment, even though it's like, okay, if she knew how to tie nautical knots, she might have been able to do that.
Right.
But, like, why would she know how to tie nautical knots?
Right.
She's not a sailor that I'm aware of.
No.
She's not a boat captain.
Right. Like, there's... I mean, did they ever explain that? Like,
they couldn't really explain it other than maybe she just happened to know this for some reason.
Right. Like I don't know.
Yeah, it's very strange. And then they were saying the whole reason somebody would bind and gag themselves is so that they didn't stop themselves at the last minute.
Oh, yeah, but the naked part with the binding and the gagging and the whole menstrual blood.
It gets a little out there.
That's, you know.
So that's exactly how it is for me, is like the minute I'm like, I'm comfortable saying it was probably a suicide, then I'm like, but wait.
Yeah, but...
There's all these other weird things where you just can't say that.
Right.
So, anyhow, I thought it was a case worth...
And if he had helped her, though, you'd think he would have just come out, well... Maybe not.
No, because that would that wouldn't implicate him.
Right.
See, and that's almost what at the end of it, when I first started looking into it, that's almost where I finally settled on, is like, I think Adam might have helped her.
Right.
But she wanted him to.
Right.
Or she enlisted his help.
He made her feel so bad. Like, was screaming at her for not watching him. And maybe he called too. Her husband called too. And said something really offensive, and then he called him, and they were all
Yeah, like he's leaving.
Against her.
Yeah, Jonah's leaving this bad, like mean message.
Right.
And then you've got the sister of the mom calling, saying, "I want to come
Randomly.
over
Yeah.
and talk about this."
And
then
maybe she did come over.
I don't. I think they proved that she didn't.
Okay.
But even so, can you imagine? Like you don't even know this person,
Right.
And,
You're
like-
feeling like
and this is
super
like
pressure.
the day after the accident.
Right.
You know, it's not like it's. I could see maybe if it had been several months or something,
Right.
and then she's like, "Hey, you know, would you ever be willing to talk to me about like how things went down that day or whatever?" But nobody, everyone, even to this day, nobody thinks Rebecca was involved in any foul play in terms
No.
of the incident with Max.
No.
That-
it just happened.
It was just horrible. Even Dina Shacknai, Max's mother, does not think
Blame
Rebecca or blame her exactly.
Right.
And neither does Jonah. But
Right.
Jonah doesn't think that his brother murdered her either.
Right. But
So-
so he thinks she committed suicide, or he
Mhm.
doesn't know.
He thinks she committed suicide.
That's weird that he can see her doing that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's a weird case.
it's a very weird case.
So anyway, we are gonna let you guys go here, but thanks for listening.
Thanks again, and have a wonderful week, day, or whatever day you're on at the moment you're listening to this podcast.
Exactly, because you never know people.
Yes. Have a great day.
And tell your
evening.
family and friends so that we
night.
can be professional podcasters. Please.
Excellent. That would be fantastic.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.